My name's David, and I'm 55 years old. I own a garage, but what makes it special to me is that I built it from the ground up. I started working when I was 18, apprenticing under my uncle. After 7 long years, I'd saved enough to open my own shop. Those first few years were tough. I worked my tail off just to keep it afloat. Over the next 3 decades, it grew into the successful business it is today. Did I fall in love? Sure did. Her name was Anne. We met at an auto show while she was still in college. There was an instant spark, and we exchanged numbers. Since we lived in different cities, most of our early relationship was built on phone calls. A few months later, we met again, and this time, she came back to my place. And was amazing. And what made that night even more special was knowing it was her first time. A few months after that, Anne's life turned upside down. She lost both her parents, and her university tuition was suddenly in jeopardy. I didn't hesitate. I knew she was the one for me, so I used my savings to pay for her education. She was overwhelmed and broke down crying, hugging me tightly. Fast forward 5 years, and had moved in with me and landed a job at a local law firm as a lawyer. One Sunday, while we were hiking, we reached the top of a hill with a breathtaking view of the city. Suddenly, Anne dropped to one knee and proposed. I was shocked but said yes. She slid a ring onto my finger and told me, "From now on, you're mine forever." 3 weeks later, we had a small, intimate wedding. The next 20 years were a dream. We had 2 kids, Mary, now 19, and Jason, 18. Mary's in university, and Jason's the lead guitarist for a local rock band. With both kids grown and out of the house, life felt settled. Sure, I never had a fancy education and was always seen as a simple guy, but it never bothered me. At least it hadn't, until Anne changed. After 20 years of marriage, I knew and inside and out. I could tell when something wasn't right. She'd taken a new job about a year ago, one that came with a bigger paycheck and a glitzier lifestyle. Her new boss, a well-known hotshot lawyer, rubbed me the wrong way from the start. Still, I never imagined he'd become such a central figure in my life. For months, I noticed Anne's behavior shifting. Late nights at the office became the norm. Her excuses were paper-thin, and I could see the lies in her eyes. Finally, after 3 months, I confronted her. That day, she saw a side of me she'd never seen before. I didn't raise my voice often, but that day, I did. After about 20 minutes of grilling, she broke down and confessed. She'd been sleeping with her boss. I asked her one question, "Why?" "You're the same man I married 20 years ago," she replied. "You've never changed, never upgraded. You still wear those shabby clothes, you act like a brute, and you're unpresentable in society. I want someone better, someone who's my equal, who can take charge. You've always been too passive, agreeing to everything I want. I need an alpha male, David. You're not that," she told to me. Her words hit me like a sledgehammer. "So you're throwing away 25 years of loyalty because I don't fit into your cocktail parties? Because I didn't dominate or mistreat you?" I asked. "I supported you through law school, raised our kids, and built a life for us, and now I'm not good enough?" She squared her shoulders, her voice turning cold. "You should accept it, David. I'll be with John, and you can either deal with it or I'll divorce you. And if you fight me, I'll take everything. Your business, your savings, even the garage you've worked your whole life for. I'll make sure you spend the rest of your days tangled in legal battles." I leaned back, watching her. "You think you can pull that off?" I asked, laughing. "Good luck." She tried to respond, but I stood up and walked out. The next morning, I left for work without a word. Once I was gone, and called her lover. "Hello, John," she said, her voice shaky. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" he asked. "David knows." I told him everything. "That's not ideal," John said, keeping his tone calm. "But it's not the end of the world. It's just, it hurt more than I expected," she admitted. "We've been together for 25 years, married for 20, with 2 kids. And now, it's all falling apart." "What did you tell him?" John asked. "I stuck to the plan," she said. "Told him the truth. That I've outgrown him. That I need a man who matches my ambition. I reminded him he's just a mechanic who never tried to better himself, and for once, I want to be with someone who can stand beside me as an equal." "Good," John said. But don't forget, this is for the best and for both of us. While working at work, I was thinking I was busy putting our kids through college and her through law school. This is the thanks I get. It just stings. When Anne and her lover rehearsed their plan, it probably sounded to her like she deserved better. Someone like him. But when I confronted her, the years of support I'd given her, both emotional and financial, made all her justifications sound hollow. She probably felt it too, though she wouldn't admit it. She called her lover. John chuckled. A little extra? That's insulting, Anne. I thought you said you loved my, style. You told me your dear old hubby hadn't satisfied you in years. Was that a lie? No, it wasn't, she admitted. I told you that because it's true. I wasn't very experienced when I married David, and he's always been so gentle. You're just so different, so dominating, so demanding. It swept me off my feet. And it will continue to sweep you away, John declared. Look, your husband will just have to accept that I'm the alpha male now. He's been demoted, and end of story. I don't want to lose him entirely, John. This still feels. Don't overthink it, John cut her off. I'll take care of it. I'll prepare a few documents and go see him myself this afternoon. Just give me the address of his garage. What documents? Whatever it takes, John said, his voice dripping with arrogance. Restraining orders, freezes on his business accounts, anything to overwhelm him. He's just a mechanic, and he won't understand half the legalese I throw at him. Trust me, by the time I'm done bullying him, he'll be begging you for mercy, said John, and hesitated. I don't know, John. You didn't see his face this morning. But John wouldn't be deterred. That afternoon, around 2 p.m., John walked into my garage. Mister, can I come in? He asked with a smirk. I know who you are, I replied, glaring at him. Good. That saves time. I assume and told you our arrangement will continue for the foreseeable future? Get to the point, I said, folding my arms. What she didn't tell you, he continued, is why you're going to let it happen. Now, if I could just set my briefcase down here. He placed it on my workbench without waiting for permission. You're aware, I'm sure, that I own the firm and works for. That means I have over 20 lawyers at my disposal, all with impeccable track records. Half of them specialize in divorce law. Believe me, I wouldn't hesitate to unleash them on you. He opened the briefcase and began pulling out documents. This, he said, holding up one paper, is a petition for divorce. Your wife has already signed it. This one freezes your company bank accounts until we sell the business under the terms of the settlement agreement. Here's another, giving you 24 hours to vacate your home. Oh, and these 4? Restraining orders. You'll be legally required to stay at least 200 meters away from me, and her home, and her workplace. Do you see where this is going, David? Said John. I stared at him, unflinching. I'll have you so tied up in legal battles that you won't be able to move, he continued. You'll give up eventually, once you've spent your last dime hiring some bargain basement lawyer. And while all this is happening, and will still be my lover. That's right, David. Neanderthals like you don't rule the world anymore. Brains beat brawn, and that's just the way it is. He paused, waiting for a reaction. But it doesn't have to be like this, he added, his tone mockingly conciliatory. Let's keep things the way they've been for the past 4 months. I'll have her when I want, and you'll have her when she wants. Why make waves? One day, I'll get bored and move on. Until then, why don't you just accept the new order of things? I took a deep breath, letting his words sink in. Then, I smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that wiped the smugness right off his face. You done, John? I asked. He faltered slightly but nodded. Good, I said. Now get the hell out of my garage. Well, I've said my piece, John said, his smug grin never wavering. Let's face it, David. If you'd been all and needed, we wouldn't be here. My advice? Take it on the chin and see this as a chance for some self-improvement. Maybe stand up to your wife a little more in the future. You lost her to me not because I'm the most charming guy, but because I'm the alpha male. I told her how it was going to be, just like I'm doing with you. I folded my arms and let him finish his rant. You done yet, windbag? I asked, my voice steady but cold. It's funny, like most people today, You don't seem to have a clue what the term alpha male even means. Would you like a mere mechanic to educate you? John sneered. Sure, cuck. Enlighten me. Well, they say a picture's worth 1,000 words, I said. And with that, I stepped forward and drove my right fist squarely into his face. There was a satisfying crunch as cartilage and teeth gave way under the impact. John crumpled to the floor, his back against the workshop wall, a look of pure astonishment on the unbroken half of his face. Consider that illustration number 1, I said calmly as he groaned in pain. Before he could recover, I yanked him to his feet, only to send him crashing back down with a devastating uppercut to his diaphragm. He collapsed onto his side, gasping for air like a fish out of water. That, I continued, is illustration number 2. As John desperately tried to catch his breath, I stomped on his outstretched hand with my steel-toed boot. The sickening crunch of bones shattering echoed through the shop. That's number 3, I added, planting a kick to his ribs that left him wheezing and clutching his chest. And that's number 4. He was whimpering now, barely able to speak. It'd help if you stopped squealing, John, I said, crouching beside him. I'm trying to teach you something. And by the way, thanks for making me break my high school promise to never use my size and strength offensively. I was going to leave you out of the consequences of Anne's actions. But then you barged in here, rubbing my nose in it. Even gentlemen have limits. I pressed my boot lightly against his throat, just enough to get his attention. Now, let's get back to the lesson. The term alpha male comes from wolves. The alpha isn't necessarily the smartest, or even the biggest wolf. He's the one who's willing to do whatever it takes, including kill, to establish his dominance. Ruthless. That's what makes an alpha. And you? You don't even come close. You might be the alpha in your little air-conditioned office, but out here in the real world, you're just another loudmouth. I stood up and stepped back, surveying the pathetic figure sprawled on my workshop floor. Let me give you a glimpse of your future, John. You could go to the police. Maybe they arrest me. Maybe they don't. Maybe I get convicted. Maybe I don't. But worst-case scenario for me? I spend 5 years in prison. 5 years to learn how to hurt people better, how to make them disappear. And when I get out, we'll have another conversation. Or you could take this as a valuable life lesson. Screw another man's wife, and you might just get what's coming to you. I glanced at the blood pooling on the floor and wrinkled my nose. Now get out of my workshop. I've got cleaning to do. Oh, and John? Alpha my ass. That evening, and called John. John, where are you? I've been waiting at the office for hours, she said, her voice impatient. I'm in the hospital, he replied, his tone groggy. Just got admitted after spending 3 hours in the ER. What? What happened? Were you in an accident? No, John said bitterly. I underestimated your husband. Stupidly went to see him alone. He broke my nose, my hand, a few ribs, and probably my cheekbone. And gasped. I don't believe it. David's never been violent. Well, believe it. I've got the x-rays to prove it, John snapped. And before you ask, the police already came. I told them it was a hit and run. Your gentle husband made it clear this was just a down payment on what I'd get if I press charges. I'm not taking any more chances with him. He's terrifying, Anne. And hesitated, her voice trembling. John, is there any way we can fix this? I don't want him to go to prison. Fix it? And I'm trying to survive. Now, I've got to go. The pain meds are kicking in. The next day, and visited John in the hospital. John, I don't know what to do, she said, wringing her hands. I drove around until late last night. I didn't know if it was safe to go home. I tried calling David, but he didn't answer. When I finally got the courage to go home, I found the locks had been changed. I had to stay at my sister's house. And this morning, I found out all our bank accounts are empty and none of our credit cards work. You've got to help me. John looked at her, his face bruised and swollen. No, and asked, confused. What do you mean? I mean no to all of it, John said firmly. If I use company resources to help you, David has every reason to come after me again. And I'm not risking it. Anne's face crumpled as John turned his head away, ending the conversation. John sat behind his hospital tray, his voice a mix of fear and resignation. "I'm sorry, Anne," he said, shaking his head. "In fact, I think it's best if I play it safe. You're fired. I'll give you 4 weeks of severance pay, but I need you to pack up and leave today. And if you see David, tell him I fired you. Maybe that'll help calm things down." Anne's eyes widened in disbelief. "Didn't you hear me, John? David has cleaned me out. Without money, a job, or your help, I'm screwed from the start." "I'm sorry, Anne," John repeated, his voice trembling. "You didn't see your husband's face when he beat me up. I'm just trying to survive." And scoffed, her voice dripping with disgust. "You were pathetic yesterday, bragging about being an alpha male. And now, here you are, quivering in fear, imagining David hiding under your bed. How I ever thought I was trading up by being with you is beyond me," said Anne. "Honestly, you're delusional to think I'd ever seriously consider a future with a cheating coward like you," said John. That same day, and sat silently in her car, parked on the side of the road. Her credit cards were maxed out, and she was out of cash. It was only a matter of time before her gas tank ran dry. She cursed herself for not keeping an emergency stash of cash. Or maybe, she thought bitterly, David had deliberately left her just enough to watch her crumble. Her phone buzzed with a low battery warning. She tried calling her kids, but neither had answered her repeated calls or texts. In all the years she'd known them, they'd never let an hour pass without replying. But today, nothing. By mid-morning, she sighed in defeat. Grabbing her useless handbag, she stepped out of the car, straightened her skirt, and stuck out her thumb on the side of the road. The van pulled up, its engine growling. The driver, wearing a calm but cold expression, stepped out and approached her, and froze in shock as she realized it was David. She thought about running, but her legs refused to move. "Get in," David said curtly. "We need to talk." Without a word, she climbed into the passenger seat, the tension in the air thick enough to cut with a knife. As I drove, I didn't even glance at her. My tone was measured, but there was no mistaking the authority in my voice. "Here's how this is going to go," I began. "You'll prepare divorce papers. No alimony. No claim to my assets. Everything I own stays with me, and everything you own stays with you. All the jewelry I bought you, you'll return it. You can write whatever cause for divorce you want. I don't care, as long as you're out of my life." And opened her mouth to protest, but I didn't let her. "After the divorce is finalized, you'll leave town. Permanently. You're not to contact me again. If our kids want to see you, that's up to them. But it will be on their terms, not yours. Your things will be packed and ready for pickup tomorrow morning by 10 a.m. If they're not picked up by 11 a.m., I'll burn them. Do you understand?" And nodded silently, her face pale. "When can I expect the papers?" I asked. "Probably a week," she stammered. "You've got 5 days," I replied, and nodded again, her eyes wide with fear. David pulled over and stopped the van. "Get out," I said. She didn't argue. As she stepped out, I glanced at her one last time. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. I smiled coldly, shut the door, and drove away. By 10:30 the next morning, and had picked up her belongings, and 5 days later, the divorce papers were delivered to my desk. The cause was listed as irreconcilable differences. I laughed out loud when he saw it. A few months later, I was officially a free man. "I regret that my marriage fell apart," I admitted to himself one evening. "I regret that and never understood the value of loyalty. I regret that she thought I couldn't change, couldn't clean up, couldn't be a presentable husband. She never realized how dangerous it could be to push a man like me to his breaking point." I shook my head, a sad smile on my face. I would have tried to save my marriage. I would have talked to her, but she made it impossible when she chose to threaten me, to back me into a corner. That was her mistake, and once she crossed that line, there was no going back for me. I looked out at the horizon, the silence of his empty home pressing in around me. I'll keep living my life, alone if I have to. Maybe one day I'll die alone. After all, every apex predator dies alone. I sighed, leaning back in my chair. A few years after the divorce was finalized, I started to rebuild my life. At first, I thought being alone was what I wanted, what I needed. But life has a funny way of surprising you. One day, while grabbing coffee at a small cafe downtown, I bumped into someone who changed everything. Her name was Rachel. She had a warmth about her, the kind that makes me feel at ease instantly. She wasn't flashy or trying to impress anyone, just genuine and down-to-earth. She'd come into the cafe to grab a coffee before heading to her job as a graphic designer at a local firm. We struck up a conversation over the weather and ended up talking for nearly an hour. Rachel wasn't anything like my ex, and that's exactly what made her perfect. She wasn't interested in status or appearances. She cared about authenticity, about real connections. Over the next few weeks, we started seeing more of each other, and it became clear we had something special. For the first time in years, I felt like someone saw me for who I was. Not as just the mechanic, but as a man with dreams, values, and a lot of love to give. Rachel encouraged me to explore new hobbies, to step out of my comfort zone. Together, we took cooking classes, went on hiking trips, and even volunteered at a local shelter. She brought light back into my life in ways I didn't even know I needed. With her, there were no games, no threats, and no pretending to be something I wasn't. Rachel showed me that love doesn't need to be complicated. It just needs to be honest. 2 years later, we got married in a quiet ceremony at the same hilltop where and had proposed to me all those years ago. This time, though, it wasn't bittersweet. It was perfect. My kids stood by my side, genuinely happy to see their father move on and find joy again. Rachel and I have built a life full of laughter, love, and mutual respect. My garage is still running strong, and Rachel even helped me expand it by setting up a website to attract new clients. Life isn't perfect, but it's real, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. So, to anyone out there feeling like life has thrown them to the wolves, take it from me. There's always hope for a brighter tomorrow. You just have to be willing to embrace it when it comes knocking. Until next time, dear listener, stay strong. And remember, the best chapters of your life may still be ahead.